On October 1st, 2012, at around 7:00 p.m., 5-year-old April Jones was playing outside with her friend in the Bryn-Y-Gog Housing Estate in West Wales. Usually, her parents wouldn't let her out so early, but they made an exception because she had received an excellent report card the day before. Tragically, April disappeared just 20 minutes later, sparking a massive search by volunteers and police. We extend our deepest sympathies to the friends and family of April Jones, who was lost so young. It was time for April Jones to return home after spending around 20 minutes playing outside with her buddy, but she did not show up outside her house around 7:00 p.m. Her parents had last seen her out on a bike. They set out to find her because they wanted to know where she was. They located April's 7-year-old friend not too far away, but April wasn't with her. The companion explained how April had entered a car. Thank goodness, she could describe the man who had abducted April. He was wearing a green jacket, she added, and had blue or green eyes, brown hair, and a beard. Incredibly intelligent for a small child, however, one element would turn out to be crucial. The small child told how April got inside his car at the driver's side. Naturally, the steering wheel is located on the right side of cars in the UK. This implied that the man was driving a car with a left-hand steering wheel. Even though it was nighttime, the police were in a hurry. The first officers arrived at the location 8 minutes after the 999 call, while the search teams were assembling. Authorities spoke with anybody who knew April. If anything unusual had occurred that day or in the days preceding her disappearance, they needed to know. There was nothing that any of the family could think of to assist the police. April had gone to her swimming class earlier that day. After returning home, she was given the same permission as any other youngster to spend some time playing outside with her friends. It had only been a short while since April went by, but it was getting late in the autumn. It would get dark soon, which would make it very difficult to find April. News quickly circulated around the neighborhood via word of mouth and social media. Locals had left their houses in a matter of hours to offer their assistance in any manner they could. Despite the good intentions, this actually made police investigators' jobs more difficult. While they were grateful for the assistance of the community, they still needed to go door to door to find out if anyone had seen April or the person who might have taken her. The issue was that very few people were home. The majority had gone to try and aid with the search. That meant that when those people went back to their homes, the police could only question them in limited ways. As is typical with most such situations, the story quickly gained national attention, and television crews and reporters from all across the nation descended upon this small town to cover it. At 10:30, the police gave the public and media a status report, noting that they were growing more concerned as they still hadn't located any evidence of April, and pleading with anyone who could have seen or knew anything to come forward immediately. April 4th, 2007, was April Jones's birthday. April was a content little child, but she wasn't without her issues. She faced a few problems in her early life as a result of being born 7 weeks early, but she overcame them and developed into a typical young girl with the aid of medical care. However, she was unable to overcome one illness, cerebral palsy. A brain injury sustained at or soon after birth is the cause of cerebral palsy. The most frequent reason is a brain oxygen shortage. The disease affected April all the way down to her hips. Fortunately for her, it was not too severe. However, this would have caused pain and difficulty with simple muscle motions. But even with her slight condition, she required careful attention. Most concerning of all, whoever had abducted her was most likely unaware of it, and her minor impairment might not have mattered to them. On the evening of October 1st, authorities made additional information regarding April's disappearance public. She had on her school polo shirt and a purple coat. More than 100 individuals had turned out to support the cops by this point. Locals were familiar with the location. Their expertise can come in very handy in locating her. Not just locals showed up to lend a hand either. Along with a large number of volunteers from England who crossed the border into Wales to offer their support, several people from South Wales traveled up to assist. There would be no easy search. There were mountains, waterfalls, gorges, dense forests, uneven ground, and thick woodlands all around the town for miles. Not to mention that it was a chilly, overcast fall evening, and that it was pouring rain outside. To guarantee their own safety, police had to meticulously arrange for all of the volunteers. Several volunteer search teams were now covering an area of about 60 square km. At about 3:30 in the morning, 8 hours after the first police contact, volunteers had been diligently making their way across the harsh Welsh countryside. Naturally, the situation was dire, but there was a certain touching, lyrical beauty in the fact that so many people were eager to donate their time to aid in the search for little April, something that must have brought some solace to her heartbroken family while they waited by the phone for word. Because they feared unsettling finds, the police had forbidden the family from participating in the search. There was still no sign of April on October 2, 2012, despite nighttime searches. Police in Wales have now issued a child rescue notice. This is essentially a nationwide alert for police agencies in the UK requesting that they make sure their officers have a description of April and the man who took her. It was the first time the nation as a whole had heard the child rescue alarm. The media was now putting tremendous pressure on the police 14 hours after April had disappeared to provide every piece of information they had. It also questioned the way the police handled the probe. One could contend the complaints leveled against the police were unjust. They had come swiftly, set up search parties, and spent the entire night searching for April. It wasn't really possible to do much more that night given the weather and conditions. After taking over the investigation, Detective Superintendent Andy John began providing the public and media with as many updates as he could. He also placed barricades and instructed his officers to stop any approaching vehicles. Also on display were posters for missing persons that included an image of April in the hopes that it would prompt someone's memory. Who lived nearby and others who lived farther away had been sending the police various reports. As is typical with investigations of this kind, the majority of these reports ended with the mention of a single name multiple times. Numerous locals identified a man who did match April's kidnapper, Mark Bridger. In general, a man from the area named Bridger was a Land Rover driver. His eyes were blue, he had short facial hair, and above all, he drove a left-hand drive car. Several witnesses claimed to have seen Bridger or his car in the vicinity when April vanished. They found Bridger's last known address and repeatedly tried to contact it, but neither he nor April Jones were there. Bridger had never been in trouble with the law before. Given the sheer number of volunteers involved in the search, it was impossible to verify the claims made by certain residents that Bridger had participated in April's first nighttime disappearance search. Given the limited information available to them and the reports from the surrounding community of Bridger's apparent disappearance, the police concentrated all of their efforts on finding him. Above the scene hovered helicopters. Police conducted a thorough search of all possible locations for him. They learned that Bridger had just moved into a brand new cottage named Mount Pleasant. No signs of life were visible to the officers upon their arrival. The property was devoid of any automobiles. They went into the cottage and called April's name, but she didn't answer. It was unclear at the moment if Bridger had been hiding from the authorities. Still, at 4:30, they made an announcement, announcing his capture. A police aircraft had spotted him strolling his dog along a country road earlier in the day, not far from April's family's residence. He appeared to have attempted to change his look by shaving off his hair and beard. Helicopters led police patrol cars to where he was. When the police stopped, they questioned the man's name. He didn't try to hide who he was. Subsequently, the policemen questioned, "Where is she?" Bridger just answered, "It was an accident. I crushed her with my car. I don't know where she is." Officers reported that Bridger was very emotional throughout the arrest. The arresting officers read him his rights, which included the following. Oddly enough, Bridger was eager to converse, though he was not required to speak. The officers reiterated that he was free to do so. He informed them, "I've been looking for her all day and night on foot. My car is in the garage. It is a left-hand driver Land Rover Discovery. I didn't abduct her. I tried my best to revive her, then panicked. I only knew her name this morning when I saw the news on the television. I just wish I could remember where I'd put her. There was no life in her. She was just on the seat. I want to say sorry to the family." They took Bridger to the closest police station in Aberystwyth. In the meantime, back in April's hometown, police units, kind search teams, volunteers, and mountain rescuers kept searching every square inch of the Welsh countryside for April. Still, despite everyone's best efforts, they were unable to locate her. Along with the emergency services staff, who worked just as hard and determinedly, hundreds of volunteers from across the nation stayed out all night, slept for a few hours, and then resumed their search. The police had received over 600 texts from people volunteering their services and proposing locations to search. Because of this, the police had a large number of volunteers to assist them in their search, and because of their local expertise, they were able to check over 20 distinct areas extensively. The people can occasionally obstruct this kind of investigation. Still, local expertise is essential in remote places like this one, and the police needed all the assistance they could get at this point. Detectives had taken Mark Bridger into custody and were questioning him. Unusually for a man of his standing, he spoke without hesitation. On the contrary, he talked candidly about what had transpired right away. Bridger acknowledged that he was in the vicinity at the time and acknowledged hitting April with his automobile while intoxicated when she was riding her bike. Mark Bridger insists that he never intended to harm April, even though he acknowledges that he was aware of his error. Instead, he maintains that he took off with her in his car. He needed to bring her to the hospital right away, and that's what I realized. It's okay, Mark. The color had gone out of her. Her lips were purple. Paul and Coral are friends of mine, and I killed their daughter. Effective then, without hesitation, Bridger acknowledges that his actions that evening caused April Jones to die. He even goes so far as to say that her parents were friends. However, Bridger's memory tends to deteriorate following the submission. He has been relatively open about his involvement thus far. Actually, these officers may have never had an easier time getting a confession from someone. Bridger can't recall anything about what he did with April's body, though following her confession, despite the police's repeated attempts to question him, Bridger's unexpected episode of amnesia persisted. "And I'm in my house, and she's not there. Being upstairs and I can't find her. I wouldn't have ditched her. I know that I wouldn't have. I'd have put her somewhere." With Mark Bridger, the cops have been quite cautious thus far. He'd been entirely honest with them. They can make him clam up with aggressive interrogation, but now they start to question his sincerity. The police were aware that there was very little likelihood that Bridger's memory would be blank at the critical moment when April's body vanished. The pressure increased as the cops questioned, even though it is evident that he was lying. He persisted in telling his story and got even more upset. In fact, the cops started to wonder if April was dead at all. Was there anything that Mark Bridger was saying that they could genuinely believe? The police decided to give Bridger a platform to give his account of what happened on Tuesday, the day he was hauled in. However, police used it as a chance on Wednesday to get more information out of him. Although Bridger insisted that he had run April over, the police received evidence from April's 7-year-old companion that April was okay, had cheerfully gotten into Bridger's car, and was grinning. Who would lie like that to a 7-year-old? In actuality, they would not have any cause to, nor would they choose to. Bridger shifted his tone. It was apparent he was unaware that the police had a witness, albeit a 7-year-old one, who saw it all. It was clear that the information contradicted his account of events, and he was upset. Regardless of his emotional condition, Bridger remained resilient to the various methods of inquiry. His version of events held steady, and he showed no signs of backing down. The detectives did something unique. Dr. Joe Sullivan is the man they brought in. Among the world's foremost authorities on criminal body language and conduct is Dr. Sullivan. Dr. Sullivan has more in store than simply watching the Bridger interviews. He also went to his house. He wanted to know everything there was to know about this individual in order to create a psychological profile. What he found astounded him. Bridger kept knives, handcuffs, and a shotgun both hidden and on display at his house. Moreover, he was employed at a slaughterhouse. According to Dr. Sullivan, Bridger was a fantasist who thought of himself as a character akin to Rambo. Stated differently, he was not a part of the real world. In defiance of Dr. Sullivan's guidance, The police chose to approach their inquiry in a paternalistic manner. And after all, Bridger was a father of 6. Bridger was not going to alter his account now. Their only chance was with the forensic specialists thoroughly searching Bridger's house. The teams at the house did manage to devise a solution. Though it may have been anyone's blood, they found little specks of it in the restroom. It's possible that Bridger cut himself shaving. It was just that the police were ignorant at this time. After submitting the samples to the laboratory, it can take up to 24 hours to receive the findings. After the police took him in and disregarded his advice, Dr. Sullivan told the officers what he believed Bridger to be. According to Dr. Sullivan, Bridger never experienced the psychological crash that one would anticipate in an abduction. It is challenging to describe this as anything other than a callous, wicked act. The results came back to the authorities on Friday. The blood sample obtained from Bridger's house was 100% confirmed as April's. In the meantime, while all of this was going on, the search for April had not slowed down. Even though the conclusion was getting less and less likely, no one was ready to quit. Then, a forensic investigation of the fireplace and subsequent discovery revealed that, although some of the blood they discovered did not appear to be April's blood, it did contain human bone tissue. He was burning the bones of April. In addition, fragments of her skull were discovered close to the fireplace. The authorities already knew that April had passed away at this point. They had proof of that. But despite their best efforts, they were unable to locate her body. Bridger would not let them know. He would maintain his silence and conceal his crimes. Mark Bridger was ultimately prosecuted for April's abduction and murder and for tampering with evidence. The evidence was adequate for the court to convict him. The entire country was in mourning. Subscribe for more amazing videos.